Picture the smartest person you have ever met. Now be honest with yourself about what you just imagined. You probably pictured someone loud, someone confident, someone solving problems out loud, quick with an answer, making very sure the whole room could see exactly how clever they were. But here is the strange thing that the research keeps quietly finding. The people with the highest measured intelligence almost never actually look like that. In fact, a surprising amount of the time, they look like the exact opposite of it. They're the quiet one tucked in the corner, the one who barely says a word in the meeting, the one people sometimes write off as shy or aloof or a little bit odd or just not that engaged. Because decades of psychology research point at something that feels genuinely counterintuitive. A very high IQ doesn't simply make you think faster, it quietly reshapes the entire way you experience the world. And that change leaves fingerprints if you know where to look. These are 11 of those fingerprints. 11 traits that researchers keep finding, again and again, in extremely intelligent people. And here is the twist that ties the whole thing together. Almost every single one of them gets mistaken by everyone around them for a flaw. So let's walk through all 11 of them, one at a time, and as we go, keep one quiet question running in the back of your mind. How many of these have you been carrying around for years, quietly filing them away as personal weaknesses? Sign 1. They spend a strange amount of time alone, and not because they dislike other people, but because their brain is almost always running something in the background, and other people, however much they're loved, interrupt the signal. In 2016, the researchers Satoshi Kanazawa and Norman Li, working out of the London School of Economics, found something odd buried in the data. For most people, more time with friends meant more happiness, but for the most intelligent people in the study, frequent socializing actually lowered their life satisfaction. For a high IQ brain, solitude isn't loneliness at all. It's fuel. The prefrontal cortex, the region that handles your deepest reasoning and reflection, simply runs cleanest in the quiet, with nothing competing for the bandwidth. So if you've ever needed to disappear for a while after a long day with people, even people you genuinely love, and felt a little guilty about it, this is worth hearing. That isn't coldness. For a certain kind of brain, it's simply how the battery recharges. Sign 2, their mind never fully switches off. Not at rest, not late at night, not even during the things that everyone else finds relaxing. There is always some quiet background process running, turning something over, building something, replaying something. The Polish psychiatrist Kazimierz Dąbrowski had a name for this restless inner state. He called it overexcitability. In gifted minds, he found, that energy runs mental laps instead of physical ones. It's a drive to think that simply has no natural off switch. And neuroscientist Rex Jung at the University of New Mexico found the physical echo of it. Higher intelligence lines up with much richer connections between distant regions of the brain. So, the high IQ brain doesn't just think faster, it connects more across a far wider web, all of it firing at once. That constant sprawling connectivity is exactly why rest comes so hard to them. The brain isn't broken and it isn't anxious for no reason. It's doing precisely, relentlessly, what it was built to do. Sign 3. They feel things far more deeply than they ever let on. This one surprises people the most because we tend to assume that high intelligence comes packaged with cold, distant detachment. The truth turns out to be almost the reverse. Dombrowski called this one emotional overexcitability, a heightened, almost raw response to beauty, to music, to injustice, to the suffering of other people. Highly intelligent people often feel the ordinary world at a volume most of us never quite reach. And the reason you almost never see it from the outside is simple. The very same people are usually extraordinarily good at hiding it, holding the whole storm behind a calm and unreadable face. Sign 4. They are genuinely comfortable saying 3 words most people hate to say: I don't know. We assume intelligence breeds unshakable confidence. The research keeps finding the opposite pattern entirely. In 1999, the psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger described what's now a famous effect. The least skilled people often feel the most certain, precisely because they don't yet know enough to see the complexity they're missing. Highly intelligent people tend to sit at the opposite end of that curve. They've seen enough exceptions, hit enough edges, to understand intimately how much is still uncertain. So when one of them says, I don't know, it isn't hesitation, it's precision. Sign 5. They quietly struggle to find people who think at their depth, and it's almost never out of any sense of superiority. It's that conversations which stop at the surface leave a very specific kind of hunger completely unfed. The psychologist Leda Hollingworth spent decades studying profoundly gifted people, and she gave this a name: the problem of stimulus poverty, a mind that simply cannot find enough depth or enough challenge in the room it happens to be standing in. So, over time, they learn to hold back. They quietly turn the volume down on themselves to match the room, and a great deal of who they actually are never fully makes it into the conversation at all. Sign 6. They change their mind the instant the evidence changes. To a high IQ brain, a belief was never meant to be an identity you defend to the death. It's a working theory held loosely, always ready to be updated when something better comes along. From the outside, this can look like pure inconsistency, like someone who can't seem to make up their mind and stick to it. But it is actually the exact opposite of confusion. It's a mind running a continuous, honest update on its picture of reality. And the people who never change their minds, no matter how much the evidence piles up against them, are almost never the sharpest people in the room. They just look the most certain. Sign 7. They watch far more than they speak. Drop a highly intelligent person into a group, and they tend to listen first, reading who defers to whom, where the real tension is hiding, and what the conversation is genuinely about underneath the actual words. Research on cognitive ability keeps tying higher intelligence to a sharper reading of social and emotional cues. They aren't slower thinkers, and they aren't checked out. They're simply gathering far more data before they decide to say anything at all, which sets up a frustrating and very common misread. The quiet observer is assumed to be the one with the least to contribute. In reality, they are often the single person in the room holding the most complete picture of what's actually going on. Sign 8. They procrastinate hardest on the work that matters the most. The small, low stakes tasks get knocked out with ease, but the one project with real personal meaning seems to live permanently, frustratingly, just one step away from ever starting. And this isn't laziness. Before a high IQ brain even begins, it already sees the full, intimidating scope of what excellent would actually require. Every flaw the finished thing might carry, every way it could fall short of the vision the mind can already picture so perfectly. Carol Dweck's research on how gifted people relate to their own potential points straight at this. The procrastination, it turns out, isn't an absence of care at all. It's the presence of far, far too much of it. Sign 9. They get bored faster than almost anyone around them. The high IQ brain habituates quickly, which means the exact same input that genuinely thrilled it yesterday simply does not land the same way today. The bar keeps quietly rising. Neuroscience has linked higher cognitive ability to a hungrier internal reward system for novelty and challenge. So when that challenge disappears, the signal drops off sharply. The restlessness you see isn't a bad mood. It's closer to a physiological response to being underfed. It's exactly why so many of them juggle several obsessions at once, switch careers more than once, and feel oddly, quietly dissatisfied in situations that look, from the outside, perfectly comfortable. The brain isn't ungrateful. It's just searching for what it was built to find. Sign 10. They doubt themselves far more than anyone around them would ever guess. And this isn't performance or false modesty fishing for reassurance. It's a real, recurring uncertainty about whether their own thinking is as reliable as everyone else seems to assume it is. The psychologist Albert Ellis noticed that highly intelligent people often hold their own output to a brutal standard they would never dream of applying to anyone else, and then read any gap between their effort and their potential as proof of some basic inadequacy. Because the deeper you genuinely understand something, the more clearly you can see how much of it is still unknown. Intelligence never hands you certainty. What it hands you instead is a sharper, more honest map of everything you still don't know. Sign 11. And this is the one that quietly ties all the others together: a persistent, low level sense of not quite belonging. Not dramatic alienation, nothing so loud as that. Just a soft, ongoing awareness of being slightly out of sync with the world around you. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, whose research on creativity and exceptional minds remains some of the most important ever done in the field, found that the most intellectually gifted people almost universally describe their inner lives as the hardest to explain and the hardest of all to share. And it isn't a disorder or a defect or anything that went wrong. It's simply the predictable result of experiencing the world at a higher resolution than most of the environments you happen to move through every single day. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, Isn't all of this just a flattering story that people tell themselves? A neat way to reframe being awkward or anxious or difficult as some kind of secret hidden genius? And honestly, that's a fair challenge to make. The truthful answer is that none of these traits, taken on its own, proves a single thing. Plenty of people are quiet, or sensitive, or restless, with no connection to IQ whatsoever. What the research actually points to is the pattern, not anyone's sign on its own, but the specific way they cluster together, and the single root cause sitting quietly underneath all of them. Because look closely enough, and every one of these 11 traits grows from the very same root, a mind that was built to process more, connect more, and feel more, with almost no filter standing between it and the raw world. And that is also exactly why every one of them gets so badly misread. The one who needs solitude looks antisocial. The one whose mind won't rest looks anxious. The one who feels everything looks fragile. The one who doubts looks insecure. The one who doesn't fit looks difficult. A whole collection of quiet little difficulties that, looked at from the right angle and the right distance, turns out to be one single thing, wearing a great many different disguises. And once you see that single root, the whole list stops looking like a catalog of problems. It starts looking like a description of one particular kind of mind, written in the language of everything the world kept getting wrong about it. So, if some of this felt a little too familiar just now, if it sat a little too close to home, then sit with that feeling for just a second before you scroll away. Maybe the solitude you've spent years quietly apologizing for was never actually a defect. Maybe the mind that refuses to switch off, the feelings you work so hard to hide, the doubt you carry everywhere, were never the things that needed fixing in the first place. Maybe they were simply the cost and the shape of a mind that experiences the whole world with the volume turned all the way up. Because a very high IQ was never really about knowing more things or thinking a little faster than the person next to you. At its core, it's about meeting the full, unfiltered complexity of the world with almost nothing standing in between you and it. And that, far more than any test score or any number on a page, is what makes it both the most powerful and the most demanding thing that a person can quietly carry through their life. Most people never see the weight of it, but maybe, now, you will.